welcome back to another episode of Drum Key. This is the podcast where we like to talk about everything drums, drummers, and a little bit of drum industry from our insight running a drum shop here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, drums, etc. My name's Adam Steck, and right over there, that's Mr. Sean Groff, the best hair in the drum industry. We have him here on retainer for this podcast. It's very exciting to have him here. Even more exciting, we have a special guest, Mr. John Hickey, joining us today.
Hey.
Woo.
Welcome.
When's he showing up?
Yeah.
He's here.
And this old man that just wandered in off the street.
We said no riffraff.
No roof.
There you go.
No, but we're all here. We're all drummers, and we do this kind of thing all the time downstairs. John's a long-time customer of drums, etc., coming in here, doing all sorts of fun stuff. Always has a story to tell and drum history to gab about. So you're very knowledgeable. Yeah. We're in good hands here. And I'll turn over the show. No, I won't do that to you.
You're going to interview us today.
Interview us, yeah, exactly. We'll do a little bit of everything. But if you guys are used to our show, we have a few segments we like to get into. This one, we like to start things off. It's called Crank It Up, Turn It Down. All right, so Crank It Up, Turn It Down. This segment is where I like to throw maybe some controversial drum habits, maybe just decisions that drummers make, just to get our opinions and kind of get the conversation started. So I'm going to throw something out there, and if you dig it, we're going to crank it up to 11.
Also, John, I am not privy to any of these questions beforehand.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
I'm going to be just as surprised as you. So this is off the cuff.
Off the cuff.
The rules are going to be stated as he says them here.
So if you dig it, you crank it up. That's the idea. You don't dig it, turn it down. We've had people hate things and unplug it, turn it off, throw it away.
I've even been known to crank it all the way down.
Crank it down.
I won't turn it down. I'll crank it down.
Sean immediately ruined this in our first segment. He said, turn it down or crank it up. Like, it was terrible. Crank it up, turn it down, gentlemen.
Okay.
And I use that term very loosely. Cymbal mounts on your bass drum. Mounting a ride cymbal or a cymbal off of your bass drum.
Crank it up, baby.
Cranking it up. Is that what you rock?
I have two jazz kits, and at my age too, you got to carry around a lot of things, and the more stands you can get rid of, that little L holder that sits on the right side of my bass drum is wonderful.
Sean?
You know me, brother. I'm cranking it up. I love it.
You're cranking it up?
Oh, yeah. As a matter of convenience, I love the look of also the 60s drum sets, and I love the way it's all mounted. Kind of, it's a trap set. It's all, on the drum and everything else. I know some purists and what have you will argue that, it takes away from the resonance of the drum. Nah, we're not fussing with that. We're going with convenience. We know that it doesn't affect the sound. Maybe if you took it into a laboratory and really put some lasers on it and dialed it in, you're going to find, just a teeny schmidt. We're playing rock and roll here, baby. It doesn't matter. Yeah. We're miking up the drums. I'm existing with a large Marshall amp next to me. No one in the crowd, no one in the audience, no one sitting at the dinner theater is going to say, you know what? You don't. You should really take that cymbal off the bass drum. It's hindering the bass drum sound. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen, folks. I'm cranking it up, baby. I love it. Put that cymbal arm right on the drum shell.
I'm with you guys. I'm cranking it up as well. Another thing that I thought of two things. One, just position-wise, that's where I want my ride cymbal anyway. Traditionally playing a 4-piece kit most of the time out there, aka one rack tom. Whether that's mounted on the shell or not doesn't matter. Either way, I want my ride nice and close, nice and convenient, nice and comfortable. Yeah. And then the second thing I just thought of was our logo for the Pennsylvania Drum Show is a very minimalist drum set design that I throw in there. Mm-hmm. And I love the simplicity of simple lines. It's just a big circle with that straight vertical line and then the cymbal shape on top and then a tom floating there. I love the simplicity of that. It's part of the icon. You know immediately what it is. Immediately what it is with that vertical line.
That was inspired by an old Buddy Rich album. Is that right?
Yeah, in part. I was talking with Rick Nonemacher, who teaches here as part of our lesson program at Drums, Etc. And we were talking about, he's got a really good eye when it comes to, he's very into, stuff that looks, mid-century. That's how his whole house is, very simple, clean lines, that kind of thing. And we were talking about that in style and different things. And I was like, I need to come up with a logo. I actually designed it, that very basic shape, if you want to call it that, for the front sign here at our current location, because I needed to fill space and I wanted something subtle but drum related.
And you wanted to get away from the robot drums etc. man that's been Proton Man that's been the drums etc. mascot for the past 30 some odd years. Also, very cool guy, very cool design, but we wanted to just move a little bit forward and go with a little bit of a different approach.
Something different. Something a little more simplistic, going back to our logo, which is based on the script writing sign that hung outside of the Queen Street location, gold, black. I don't know. It just felt right. It just felt right. So 3 cranks it up on cymbal mounts on bass drums.
High fives all around.
Here
baby.
we go. All right, we're all in agreement. No fights. No fights have broken out yet. Second one, related but not directly related. Crank it up, turn it down. Vintage drum hardware. Vintage drum hardware.
Man, I've lived it. Way down.
The man knows.
It's from way back. The drums were great, but I don't know what the problem was with the hardware. That I know there's probably a segment in your show you're going to talk about embarrassing moments, and they almost exclusively had to do with failure of hardware.
Yeah.
So, the hardware today is wonderful. Especially, it's getting lighter, and the Yamaha Crosstown stuff is great. I see everybody carrying that stuff now. Even the younger guys, this is great.
Absolutely.
What am I carrying all this stuff for?
Yep.
It's fantastic. Yep.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with John. I am turning it down. As far as functionality is concerned,
right?
If you're gigging this stuff, no, it's not going to happen. I think it's cool as a conversation piece, having it there. Like, okay, it's kind of neat. And if you have it just kind of set up, it's kind of rad looking. I like it. But as far as functioning, the tilters, the way they tear up and fold up, hardware's come a long way, and I agree with what John said. I love the drums of the 60s. I think they were my favorite. That's my favorite era. Sure. I have 2 sets myself, from the 60s, and I don't play when I use those drums, I use modern hardware.
Right.
And that's because the hardware from that era just didn't function well.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to,
turn it down.
Yeah, I'm going to turn it down. The drum hardware's come a long way.
Yeah. I'm cranking up the looks, turning down the practicality of it for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I think when you see some of these retro kits coming out, the old '60s sets, people acquire them. They polish them up and bring them out.
Yeah.
And you look at Slingerland, you look at Ludwig, especially where they have the rail consulate for the tom. That's turned down or it's removed, and they've got a snare stand.
That's right.
They just scratched it off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, speaking of that, we rewrapped your '60s Ludwig kit here, which we do we do drum rewrapping. If you guys haven't seen it out there, we rewrap drums here at Drums Etc. If you want to restore it to look like it originally did, which is in this case what we ended up doing with the silver sparkle, bringing it back. But when we did that, I remember talking to you because I'd taken the brackets off, obviously to get the wrap off and to put it all back together. And then I ended up swapping the brackets because one of your brackets was the standard T wing nut, and the other one you still had to use the wrench to tighten and loosen. And we had a good conversation about that, about where is it more convenient to have that? Would you rather have that bracket for your, used for your cymbal stand? If you had one and the other, would you rather have it on your rack tom to get that on and off, or use it for the cymbal mount coming off the bass drum? Because 90% of the time with these vintage kits, it's the same mount, same hole spacing, same difference. But I remember that being just like so annoying. Like now you got to either keep your Ludwig wrench or have something that'll work just to be able to set up or tear down. That stinks.
Yeah, I mean that rail consulate had nuts on it. You had to go get a wrench to tighten them.
Yep.
And if you lose that, I don't know what you did. I never had that issue with losing the key, but the wrench. But still, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I have I have a 60 Slingerland that I have set up at home, and just last week I dialed in my drum positioning, my tom-tom positioning. It took me about a half hour to do it. And I thought to myself, man, I'd love to play this kit out, but I would not use the tom holder. I'm using it at home because I have it set finally better than it's ever been set up before. I love it. It's great. But it took me a long time to get there because it was like the way it's designed, like you think it's going to be good and you put it on and it goes, ooh.
Yep.
down slightly. I'm just like, oh my gosh. Then you have to overcompensate a little bit. And you're like, I have it perfect right now, and I don't want to move it, and it's set up at home, and that's the way it's going to be.
All right, sounds good. All
Forever and a day.
right. Forever and a day.
Yes.
One more speed
Right.
round, just real quick. Let's hit one more here. Crank it up, turn it down. Owning your own set of drum mics.
I'll crank it up.
Crank it up.
Yeah.
I think that's priority for drummers to have their
I
own
think
mics.
so. It really depends on what you're doing. If you're a basement player and you don't aspire to, record or gig or anything, then it's not necessary. But early on, a couple of situations presented itself where I needed my own set of drum mics. I didn't invest in the top of the line. I have the Shure PG series. I've had them for almost 20 years now. I use the bass drum mic all the time. I mean, if ever I'm playing any gig, I at least mic up the bass drum. And
Sure.
I've gotten nothing but rave reviews on that mic, and they're good to have. I've let you use them and borrow them. I've gone into studios where I didn't know what they're going if they're going to have overheads, and I have overheads. I have all Tom mics. I have a couple of 57s. So
Yeah.
it's good to have all of those mics at your disposal. Because you never know what situation you're going to be in. Are you going to be at a club where you're micing all of your drums? Is someone micing them for you? Are you going to provide that? I'm in a situation now where we're running our sound a lot, so I'm glad I have those mics. So I'd say crank it up. Get your own mics.
What do you think, John?
I'm going to take this right to the middle ground.
Okay.
You don't necessarily have to own them, but you should know where to get them if you need them,
Gotcha.
and have somebody that can help you with it. In my experience, playing in clubs, a lot of clubs I play with in New York City, they've got the sound going, and now more than ever, I'm seeing places out here, Mickey's and places like that where they come out and, you get white glove service,
Oh yeah.
So I have no strong opinion about it, but I do know that they're important sometimes, and the time that you need them is not the time not to have a source. So
Yeah, for sure.
it's kind of one of those things, It's like the airbag in your car, right? It may be
right.
there for 20 years, you never use it, but it's there.
Yeah.
So
No doubt.
the same with the mics. I can't see investing that kind of money and having them sit around because it depends on what you're doing.
Yeah.
Depends on what you're doing
Yeah.
as a drummer.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm gonna crank it up. I didn't get drum mics until I started doing, some home recording. To be honest with you, that's when I really started investing in that kind of thing. But I will say that they've come in handy, and I'll bring them to the gig. I'll bring a lot of extra stuff to the gig, which infuriates me 90% of the time. But that 10% of the time that something goes wrong or something breaks or something moves, it's nice to have that. I've had it not where I needed another mic necessarily, but the sound guy preferred it and didn't have it available, so I happened to have it in my bag. I've done that with much more things like drum hardware. Everywhere I go, whether no matter what venue it is, if it's a house kit and the stuff's all missing on the cymbal stands, I've got enough in my bag to replace it and leave it there to do the next guy a favor. So
Right.
I'm always trying to bring a little bit extra than what I do need. And then hopefully pay it forward. But with mics, sorry guys, they're too expensive. I can't leave a mic behind. So.
No, you can't
So
do
we're not
that.
going to do that. No, all right, let's move
One
on.
more thing.
Yeah, go
Out,
ahead.
all you people out in podcast land, you just heard it. I said, if you don't have them, know where to get them. I just got 2 sources.
There you go.
Thank
Two
you.
other drummers that have the mics that are willing and able to lend them out at any time. At any time. All right, let's move on. Let's talk drum industry news. All right, so drum industry news. This is where we love to highlight things happening now, whether that's in the grand world of drums, the big overall industry, or specifically in our shop having to do with drums, etc. This one is big. This is an announcement that was made. We're getting a lot of attention because of some social media posts about this, but we're very excited to. Obviously, we're not announcing it, but we're very excited to continue to talk about the re-release. Rogers is back. So Rogers Drums USA is a thing again, made here in the United States, out in California. Rogers has relaunched, revamped everything. They've been making new Rogers, as people are referring to them, has been making a lot of parts for a few years now. So they've been slowly reinstating iconic lugs and badges and a couple accessories. Eventually, they came up with the strainer and butt plate for the, and then Dynasonic.
I'm getting ahead of myself.
What's going on
Adam.
over here?
I don't know. I'm getting
And
ahead
then basically every part for your Dynasonic snare that you lost, broke, or sadly got misplaced somewhere. So then they ramped into snare drums, and now they've got kits coming out left and right, new finishes, new models, all sorts of stuff. With new Rogers stuff, the drums are going to be maple or maple poplar shells. We got some maple re-rings in there. Beautiful Dynasonics. We've got Power 10s, Power Tones. We've got Super 10s. There we go. Power Tone, Super 10, Cleveland drums. We've got a tower kit downstairs. It's crazy. There's a lot of Rogers back into the world. So, Sean, if you want to just kind of talk about our experience so far.
Yeah, I think that our experience it started with the parts. You know, Rogers began producing their Dynasonic drums a few years back, and they were, you know, high quality, high dollar drum. But really, what we saw was, you know, the clock throw off, the badges, the beaver tail lugs, you know, all of the parts, the Rogers Dynasonic rail underneath the snare drum. Just the parts really started to sell for us, and of course their tom holders, their brackets, their internal mufflers, everything with a modern twist to it. So you know, that's what we started with first, and then all of a sudden, you know, you notice that not only are they making these beautiful Dynasonic drums, but they've introduced a whole line. Adam, you just said this is their Tower series here, and this is a beautiful drum with a very unique finish to it. This is a lacquer finish, silver sparkle, a gold sparkle, and we've just been so impressed with the quality of these drums that we are just happy to be on board. We've got a lot of feedback online when we posted these videos, and I don't know if a lot of people even knew that the Rogers were making full line drums, and you know, all their Cleveland sets or Tower sets, and just the different configurations, the different beautiful finishes too. I mean, these are so unique to Rogers. This isn't, you know, just regular lacquer, blue, red, whatever else. I mean, this is a stunning, beautiful finish with reinforcement rings on the inside, and this is a maple gum. Is it
The maple poplar.
maple poplar? Okay, these drums sing. They are beautiful. They are quality, and we've been so impressed with them.
Yeah. John, now you've collected Rogers for years.
I
You've
did.
had
Yes.
tons of kits. So can you talk briefly about your experience with Rogers and what you've had over the years, and then eventually get around to your honest, unbiased, what do you think of the new stuff?
Well, the most notable aspect is they've fixed the hardware problem.
Yeah.
Because if especially this tom mount here, you know, they used to have this knob of metal right here, a round orb, if you will, and it had three or four little screws that you kind of
Flivomatic stuff,
try to get them in the right position. And after a year or two, this whole thing will be eaten up by changes in position, and then of course they stop working. So this thing will be flopping around depending on which way you tightened it up. It was a nightmare, and it's great to see Rogers back. What a wonderful history, and it's great to see that they've improved on these. I guess they realized, you know, you got to get this thing straightened out.
Yeah.
And they did a great job actually. Everything else on the drums, you know, the old bread and butter lugs, I guess, you know, those didn't have a great history.
Yeah, they would break as well.
Yeah, but
everything has been updated. I like the look of this because it looks like a vintage tom arm, like they used to make them, but with the modern upgrades to it. So they did a really good job at that.
do you know that Rogers is making the old lugs?
Yes.
Yes, good.
Yes. Yep.
That's an interesting
Yeah.
thing, the bread and butter lugs.
Yes.
Yeah, it is, and it's
They're made totally differently, but
yeah,
nonetheless.
all the stuff is cross compatible. So if
Yeah.
someone has a vintage drum that they're looking to fix one broken part on, or get a fresh set of lugs, which is a wild request, but you know what I mean, you can do that, or have a
Right.
piece fit in with what you have.
Right.
The only difference is that yours might be all scuffed up, but Sean will scuff them up for you before he sends them out to match how beat up your drum is, and then it'll
right.
match perfectly. This one's
That's
too
right. I'll do
shiny.
that.
We'll scuff it up a little
I'll
bit.
take it out on the road with me, and I'll
throw it
play
around.
it, just
Yeah.
throw it around a little bit. That way it matches, and it's not like a sore thumb sticking out. The one bright lug that's beautiful and shiny. It's like that one's new.
Yeah.
You replace that one.
Yeah, yeah. I do want to touch briefly on Big R Rogers. The Big R badge is what we're referring to. A lot of folks have had experience with Rogers drums, and they're not talking about the '60s era of Rogers that we all love, and that's kind of like the heritage that's being brought back. I looked up Big R, and I was trying to narrow it down. And a lot of people said that that style started mid '70s with that Big R badge, but continued obviously into the late '90s. So heading into that later period of Rogers, of the Rogers Big R badge, there was a lot of stuff being outsourced, a lot of overseas. Those are not Rogers USA kits. So if your experience with a Rogers kit was potentially subpar as far as the shells or construction or quality, there's chance that it was from that era.
That's right.
And I think that's really important that folks realize that with any legacy company that's been around forever, there might be little patches of learning or missteps.
Yep.
So I'm excited to see that the product that's coming back in is the high quality USA made stuff.
And there was also another brief period of time where Yamaha had acquired the name Rogers, and it may have only been 2 years that they produced drums. Really, what they were just entry level drums with the Rogers name on it.
Yeah.
But that didn't last too long. But you may even have one of those. But that is not what we're dealing with here.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know early Big R stuff said Made in USA on it.
Okay.
So there was like there's some gems out there. There's some gems out there. Not saying that the other stuff is falling apart spontaneously, but it might not have been like this is a premier high end product that they're producing, and that era might not have lived up to that hype. But yeah, I think the overall take on the new stuff is it's Drums Etc. approved, guys. So if you want to check any of it out and you are local, come into Drums Etc. If not, support your local drum shops. Reach out to them, see if they're stocking the Rogers stuff. See if they even have a drum or some of the hardware that you can check out, just so you can see the quality of it and know and make an educated purchase.
Yeah.
But it's exciting. It's very exciting. Exciting. One quick note I just saw because it was released 2 days ago is that years ago DW and the DW family acquired the Slingerland name.
That's right.
And at NAMM 2 days ago, they announced they're bringing Slingerland back.
Oh wow.
And they're doing the same kind of thing, starting with snare drums.
Okay.
I've seen the snare drums.
Yeah, and they
They're
have a couple
gorgeous.
prototype
Yeah.
kits out at NAMM. But it's pretty interesting to see that that heritage, that legacy kind of thing come back. And I get that question a lot when folks come in, if they've been out of the drum game since the 70s, they're like, oh, is Roger still making drums? Is Slingerland still making drums? Is Ludwig,
Now all of a sudden you could say yes.
Now all of a sudden we can say, yeah, they actually are. I don't know if you're going to want to spend $2,000 on a snare drum right out of the gate when you're getting back into drums, looking for a $500 kit or something. But yeah, it's cool. It's cool. I dig the reissue, the retro thing. Tama Drums has been doing a lot of that with the Superstar this past year. I think it's cool. I think it's definitely something that we're seeing happen. And my favorite part about this type of thing is when folks that were kids when the stuff came out and they drooled over it in the shop windows but couldn't afford any of it.
Now you have the money.
Now they're adults. Now they're grown up. They got some disposable income and they're able to get like the kit of their dreams. And that's no longer like impossible to do, or you got to search Reverb or eBay or something. So it's cool. Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. All right, let's move forward. We're going to pop into the Hall of Fame segment. All right, so Hall of Fame, we like to highlight specific products that we think are awesome, that we think have either had a legacy over time or are current modern things that have solved the problem, or that we endorse here at the shop and think that either, obviously the product has to hold up, but also we know insight behind the product. We know the manufacturers. We know how the reps view small business. We know how the industry has taken care of them and how they're taking care of the industry. And this is kind of checking all the boxes. An absolutely great company, great product, and someone that's making things affordable for local drum shops to get into and to sell and to offer. And a trendy thing that is currently very, very out there as far as, modern social media presence and everything as well. So the 20th inductee into the Drum Key Hall of Fame is the snare weight. It is the snare weight drum dampener. If you guys haven't seen these are leather drum dampeners that clip onto the rim of your drum set. We've clamped these onto triple flange, die cast, all sorts of roll in, roll out, pretty much every kind of hoop, wood hoop even, it'll clamp on there. And you've got a strip of leather that lays around the rim of the drum, as Sean's demonstrating there. And then it's got a magnet built into it. So it actually has 4 positions. This is the M80. I should clarify. Snare Weight makes a whole bunch of products. Some of them are big blocks of metal. Some of them are small little strips. Some of them are adjustable. This is the Snare Weight M80, which is our favorite, because you can have it on with maximum dampening. There's an off position with no dampening. And then there's 2 in-betweens because you can flip up the wings to have a little bit more and a little bit more. So I don't know how well it's going to translate, but do you want to hit it with nothing on and then
absolutely
nothing and a little bit more?
So of course, one of the most common questions we get asked is, "Hey, my drums are ringing a little bit too much. How do I stop that?" And this is a really convenient way to, take action over the overtone of your snare drum, because maybe sometimes you do want a little overtone. Well, it used to be, okay, you put a little moon gel on there, you put a ring on. Well, if you want your drum to be open up, you'd have to take off the
right, or
system,
your wallet,
put it on the floor. Well, this is basically your wallet, but it flips on and off seamless between songs or what have you, and it's very effective, and it clips onto the rim. And I have one on my drum. It just lives there.
Mm-hmm.
When I gig at the end of the night, I put it in my bag, and my snare weight lives there. But we'll hear it. Hopefully, this will translate okay here. So this is the snare weight on the drum itself.
Do it off first.
Do it off first. Okay,
Yeah.
that's probably a good idea.
Let it ring out a lit.
Do a rim shot. Beautiful sounding drum, but maybe you want to take a little bit of that tone out of it and a little bit of the edge off the drum. Flip this sucker down. Nice and snappy.
Nice.
Rim shot. And we can manipulate
A little
it
bit less.
here, a little bit
Put
less.
one flap up. A little bit more tone. Here it started to come through.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Very effective.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been thinking about this problem, as many drummers probably have, for a very long time. And what could we do? Maybe come out with a Drums Etc. product. I'm always thinking that way.
Sure.
Of like what is convenient, what is the right amount of fuss versus not fuss versus it doesn't matter. And we say it 1,000 times in the podcast. Sean and I are not fussy people at all. But guess who is? Sound guys. The band.
Oh, yes.
The manager at the freaking restaurant. Okay?
Yeah.
They're going to be fussy about every little thing, right? So it's good to have this at your disposal. Not saying that every time. And then I've experimented with it too. I prefer an open snare, right? Personally.
Okay.
But between the amount of gigs that I do where I'm getting mic'd up, or I'm in a small room, or I'm recording, I use these things almost all the time.
All right. And you'll be recording today. You're going to a studio today.
Yep.
Will you be taking one of these along with
Yep.
you?
It's already on my drum.
You absolutely will, of course.
Yeah, yep. I've got one on my snare, and I actually have. I like it on my snare off or on fully, and then with the wings flipped up for my rack tom and floor tom too.
Yeah.
It's very nice. And I actually when I rent out a kit, we do professional backline for shows and festivals locally here in Lancaster. And when we rent out a kit, a lot of times we'll throw some of these in there for someone to be able to use. And it's funny when I see the pictures or videos of people playing, they get moved around. Like sometimes there'll be 2 on the floor tom because they want a little more dead and the snare wide open. Sometimes the snare will be flipped out or flipped up or off or on. But never do I find them like thrown on the floor or lost or trampled or smushed, because it's very quick to figure out and very intuitive that you can just flip it off, but it's still, flip the dampening off, but the dampening, the snare weight stays on the drum. So, yeah. It's very easy to adjust, very self-explanatory. I like the fact that there's no goop
Yeah. No
That's
goop.
a technical term.
Yes.
No
The moon
goop,
gel.
no gnarly hairs getting stuck to it inside your case, sawdust from your drumsticks. You know,
Yeah. Rest in peace, Moon Gel.
rest in
No
peace.
doubt.
Rest in peace. Cool. I think that's it's self-explanatory, guys. Come in, try one. We have them in our studios here at Drums Etc. So if there's not lessons going on, feel free to go in there, wail away, and check it out. Or we'll pop a demo. We always have a demo or two out on the floor with our snare drum display, so you guys can actually check this stuff out. And we can do A/B tests with re-rings, with Moonjo, with whatever. And then that's the best part.
Pick your
We're
poison.
impartial. Pick your poison. We dig them. We think they're worth giving a try. So we're going to pop into our next segment of the show. Quick question. All right, so quick question. This is a fun part of our show where we like to highlight questions from our audience. And it's at this point that I'd be grabbing the drum that is right next to me that I totally prepared for. Sean, that I totally prepared for.
Oh, no.
That is totally still sitting downstairs.
Oh, no.
If you guys, can you go grab it?
Yeah,
the drum
sure.
key, please.
I'll be right back.
If you guys have any questions or any comments for the show, topic suggestions, feel free to DM them anywhere that you see this content. So if you're watching on YouTube, put them in the comments. If you're on Facebook or Instagram, comments, story, share, whatever you want to do. However you want to get through to us, you can reach out to us. But also, a fun thing that we just added to our retail store floor downstairs in our waiting room area for our waiting room table for our lessons, our drum lessons. We have, there it is. We have the Drum Key Podcast drum. And how am I supposed to do this?
I don't know.
This is live.
I was thinking about that.
So we have this, which is our suggestion drum, and we've gotten a whole bunch of customers and students and parents of students throwing in topic suggestions into this drum. And I also put all of the suggestion things on top of them, which Sean lovingly left on top for me.
You're welcome.
So unless I have a large tweezer, this is not going to happen. So I'm gonna shake one out, like you locked your
figured.
guitar pick.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
We're gonna pull one of these live. Oh boy, this is nearly impossible. Oh, I got one. All right.
No more apples in the vending machine, please.
Quick question. Here we go. This topic comes to us from Tim.
Ooh.
Tim wants us to talk about the process of practicing with a metronome. Practicing with a metronome. Do you do it? How often do you do it? Do you think it's worthwhile? Do you keep it on the quarter note click? Do you move it around? All sorts of fun topics with metronomes. By fun topics, I mean topics, because metronomes are not fun for me. It's not an exciting, yay, I get to play with a metronome type of thing. But what are your thoughts on it, Sean? You played with a click station.
I did. You know, when you're first learning and you're forced to practice to a metronome, you don't think you need to until you start practicing with one. You're like, there's something wrong with this metronome over here. You know, there's something wrong. and you quickly realize, oh no, it's you. But I was told, I was playing in a band where we were playing with a lot of guitar delay, and I was told to play with a metronome because it would be better. And there's no push and pull, and if you're pushing and pulling with playing a lot of delay, it'll come off sounding muddled.
Yeah.
And,
or your guitar player's over stomping on the box the entire show.
I didn't want to do it at first, but was forced to do it, and then I played with a click live, and I really actually enjoyed it. I was very comfortable with it at that point. I haven't been doing that for a number of years now, but I say my advice is just jump in and start doing it.
Yeah.
Number one, first maybe play along to records, especially newer ones, newer songs, things that are modern, because those have been recorded to a click already. So you're kind of already playing to a click. And also, if you are playing something you're not comfortable with, playing it along to a click gives it purpose. Because if you don't have that click and you're just playing an open air and you're just playing a rhythm, you just kind of feel like whatever. But playing with that click there, it kind of gives you a little bit of a bottom, and feel like you're doing something, and you're on time, and it helps you practice. So I think my advice is, with playing along to a click, is just jump in the deep end and begin playing along to a click track.
Yeah.
If you're not used to it, play a simple beat along to a click and see where you land with it. Mess around with it. Play simple, like straightforward rock beat. Let's say if you're not used to playing to a click, see how slow you can go. That's always tougher. See how fast you can go. I think right in the middle is where you need to be, and then just kind of work around that. Work with playing fills, and that's really is what's going to help you with your timing. Is going in and out of different rhythms and beats, and coming back in on time,
And not speeding it up or slowing it down every
Right.
time. Usually speeding it up.
Yep.
Yes, definitely.
What do you think, John?
Well,
Drum
I
and
mean,
click, metronome.
going way back, I mean, I never, none of my drum instructors, put a metronome in front of me. So I didn't receive my initial training that way. But going back maybe 10 years now, I've actually, I have an app on my phone, and I use it for a lot of things. I use it for, I was playing with this band, and they were infatuated with, is he playing in front of the beat? Is he playing behind the beat?
boy.
And that's a whole 5 podcasts, I think, to talk
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
It is such a matter of perception, and so I started to use it to delve more into that, but also to start working more on polyrhythms and stuff like that. And listening to the click, put the click on 120 and its quarter notes, and then start thinking about playing something in 5, and using 8th notes, or 16th notes, whatever it might be. That's a great reference point for me.
Absolutely.
So it's a great tool. Once again, I mean, metronomes just were not the thing way back.
No.
Yes, if you picked up the violin, you picked up piano. Every good teacher that was worth their salt would put a metronome in front of you. You got to understand this. But I do think that some people are born with an incredible sense of time, and it's there. And then there's people who just don't get it at all, and they need a metronome more than others do. But I think it's a very personal thing.
Yeah.
Unless a teacher insists on it, then that's something else. You have to deal with that and
Yeah.
and work through it and get some benefit out of it. But
Yeah.
I'm kind of neutral about that whole thing.
I'm going to say this because you touched on something that is very important, and it happened to me, and it could happen to any one of us, and that is drums are loud. So my first metronome was this little metronome that I had. It's impossible. I'm a drum set player. I'm like, how am I can't hear it. I can't you need a good set of headphones to
Yeah.
go along with
Yeah.
this metronome. Whether or not you buy a Tama rhythm watch, or it's a Yamaha click station, or some type of auxiliary metronome, or one on your phone, because nowadays you can get
Yeah.
the app on your phone, which is great. You need a good set of isolation headphones to be able to feel and hear that click track and to practice, because without it, you're going to be fighting yourself. And I didn't know how to play along to the metronome, mostly because I couldn't hear it and I didn't have the right tools. So the right tools are getting a metronome, number one, and having a good set of isolation headphones to be
Right.
able to practice along
Right.
with it.
Which ideally you have anyway, learning songs on a drum set.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Ideal, I mean.
Well, back
if-
when I started,
if you're not,
I didn't.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Is I think that's an important note there too. Is like that's a great great practice tool. Having a good set of headphones that protects your hearing, that you can actually play whenever, and you don't have to have a speaker blaring at you, is great. The number one
Right.
thing is playing with people, of course.
Yes.
But nowadays, a lot of modern gigs require to play with a click in the background, or you might just be in your ears or in someone else's ears. I'm currently fighting with this. I say fighting with this because for years I never used a click for much anything, right? And then I started to record, and then people would put the click on. I'm like, oh boy, I am like,
Here we go.
like that is not the place. By the way, folks, in the studio recording song music is not the place to try to get comfortable with the click, right?
Right.
So definitely that's a fun thing to something to keep in mind if you're looking to record music. Not that you need to use one. I'm recording later today. What I use, I'm currently building I say building because I've only gigged it out. I'm only gigging it out a couple times this year so far. Is a a hybrid version of that. For example, another use for the metronome, rather than having it play through the entire song, I have an app preloaded with tempos, and I just have it play through twice, and then I click the song in. It's a reference point, just a jumping off point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you hear da 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 da, you can count the song in.
Yeah.
And then let the
point.
song go where it goes. Because I play with a lot of people that don't want that. They don't want the produced. They don't want everyone in sync on like backing tracks. Not a thing in a lot of folk, singer-songwriter country music.
Yeah.
You know, obviously big country music is now doing that and stuff. But for the most part, the local gigs and stuff, not a thing. But what they don't like is when I start a song way too fast or way too slow. So when I'm trying to learn a giant set list or something, I'm learning a set right now of like 30 songs for one gig. 2 rehearsals, 1 gig, 30 songs, all covers, right? So that kind of gig is like, okay, how much time is this going to take me to learn the material, and what do I need? I need the basic layout of the song structure, but it'd be nice to have the clicks, because I'm not listening to it every day, you know?
Yes.
So just another use for it. But yeah, great question. If you guys have any questions, like I mentioned before, pop into Drums Etc., put them in the drum, which we'll put back downstairs. Comments, DMs, wherever you can find Drums Etc. or Drum Key Podcast. We are accepting your questions and contributions to the show. But without further ado, let's jump into the last segment between the plies. All right.
Wow.
So we may not have recorded the last segment. We'll see. We at least have the audio. We at least have the audio.
We can have it animated.
Yeah, that'll be way easier. I'd rather mime it.
Yeah.
We'll just put a still up if we messed it up. But last segment here on the show called Between the Plies. This is where we dive into kind of the background of our guest. We share stories. We talk about how drums have impacted their lives and how they're impacting the lives of others through music. So, John Hickey, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for gabbing with us today.
Thank you for inviting me here.
A snowstorm hindered our first set podcast we were going to do, but now it's a beautiful day outside today, and here we are.
Yeah.
Hey, quick note, just to get back to this metronome real quick, because I got to share this.
Yes.
The great Jeff Porcaro was doing a recording session with Nicolette Larson, who was not the greatest person to work with. But anyway, he sits down, they start pushing a click to his headphones, and he said, "What the F is this?" Mm-hmm. And she comes out and says, "Everybody in the band is..." He said, "You put a click through this, I'm leaving." And, the great Jeff Porcaro did not need a click.
No.
That's just a side story.
Yeah.
His book is out there, by the way. If you can find it out in the bookstores. Mm-hmm. I think Hudson Music might have it. Might be on Amazon. It's a great read.
Yeah, absolutely. There are those drummers that have their way of doing things. And, hey, once you have enough to back up your claims, who's going to argue?
I think, going back to the click here, I think it's just a good tool to be able to develop your time, because everyone wants everyone has their opinion on it. Mm-hmm. Like, it should be organic. Well, that's fine, but what you don't want is a drummer that just totally speeds up and totally slows down.
Whether or not using it live.
Yeah, I mean, you can go a little bit here and there, but you want to be in the ballpark, and that's where a metronome just helps develop your timing and your feel. So that's just it.
Surely, yep.
Wow. Going overtime on the metronome talk.
All right.
It's all good. If I had
dorks, we could talk all day about
I
this
had
stuff.
to predict any of the segments to go over, it was not the one about a metronome. It's okay. But we're here with John Hickey, and I'd like to just kind of start off this segment just real quick, talking about your start in drumming. What made you pick up the sticks? Was it a performance? Okay. Was it a player? What is your first experiences with the drums? And then we'll fast forward into more current things going on for you.
Okay, so I go way back to 1964 in February, and it wasn't the Beatles.
Ooh, interesting.
So the Beatles were on, Ed Sullivan. I know Rick Nonnemarker is a huge Beatles fan.
Oh, yeah.
And he could tell you the exact date they were on. I want to say the 16th or the 14th of February. I don't remember. But something else happened before that.
Huh.
So I grew up in New York City in the Bronx and in a heavily Hispanic neighborhood. And so I had the pleasure of listening to all of this Latin music when I'm 8, 9, 10 years old. The multiple layers of percussion going everywhere. It's it just fascinated me. But in, I think it was December of 1963, we had this great group called the Four Seasons. And I guess they put out a play called Jersey Boys. I don't know if you've seen it or not. But they had a new song, a new hit. It was called Dawn. It had an opening fill on the toms. And when I heard that, it was over for me. I said, that's what I want to do. Fast forward, the guy that did that fill was a studio musician by the name of Buddy Salzman. And Buddy played that whole song without cymbals or a hi-hat. So if you go back now onto Spotify and crank it up, you're going to hear this. It's just this driving rhythm, and it's filled with toms, and that's it. And so that's what really got me sucked in. Then the Beatles happened in February, and, everybody was huddled around the television that night, and the Beatles happened, and I just had no reaction to it. I was just so involved with the whole Latin thing and looking at all this music that was still alive before the Beatles happened, because the Beatles were really the seminal group that started everything. I mean, it started the massive sale of musical instruments. I mean, everybody wanted to have a band, and it's. But I went on to do just that. I mean, I started to self-teach. Had many summers of saving up money to buy a set of drums. I was playing on, if you recall, these wooden hangers that had the little dowel going across so you put your pants on. I broke all those things off. My mother was furious, but those were my drumsticks.
Yeah,
and
perfect.
I would go around the house. She'd say, "Where'd you get those from?" "Oh, Ma, I had no idea where you could even buy drumsticks. I didn't know anything."
Yeah.
And but then, we're in high school and everybody's doing their thing, and the bands start forming, and all of a sudden you just unconsciously you get into all this, and you get so involved and you get taken in, and with that I started to learn things. I started to learn I listened to different types of music. My friends, we got a little older, 16, 17. We still had this thing called a high school dance where we had bands, and they were all over the city. You could go to a high school dance on a Friday night, on a Saturday night, nonstop. And so we formed bands, and we did that. And then I discovered New York City, West 48th Street, Music Row. And that's where the famous Manny's was, along with Sam Ash and Terminal, all these. The street was lined with music stores. And just started going down there and just being in stores, I had no money to spend, but just being around all these musicians walking in. And I'll tell you a quick story. Today, when you buy drumsticks, they're quote unquote a match pair, and they have a little cardboard thing around them. But back in the day, they had these big little pieces of furniture with pigeonholes in them, and they just had loose drumsticks. I mean, they were packed in by size, but. And one day I was in Manny's, and there was this guy up at the drum counter, and he had a big pile of drumsticks. And he's rolling them along, going back and forth. And he's rolling the sticks back and forth. And I'm looking at the guy, and the guy behind the counter says, "Hey, kid, come here." I said, "What?" I said, "Yeah, what's he doing?" He said, "He's rolling the drumsticks. He's buying sticks, and he wants to make sure they're perfectly straight. That's why he's rolling them across the counter." The guy that was rolling him across the counter was the great drummer Chico Hamilton. So I went, "Whoa, Chico!" I mean, I had been listening to jazz, and here's this guy. He's played with everybody, and so I kind of learned stuff like that. And all of a sudden, you hang around, you listen, you talk, and you start absorbing all this stuff.
Right.
And then I saw some sign inside Manny's that talked about drum lessons. So there was this guy. He's a very colorful character, very famous teacher named Sam Yolano. He had a very unorthodox way of teaching people how to play the drums. So he was a block away in the Brill Building, where coincidentally, Carole King, Neil Diamond, all these people were in there writing songs at the time for,
Yeah.
they were getting like $10 a song. And the building was loaded with musical people. My brother was taking guitar with a jazz guitarist named Sal Salvador. And one day I saw this guy's name. We was in the same building. So my brother would go take his guitar lesson. I would go in and take it from Sam. And the first thing Sam sold you was a pair of metal drumsticks. They weighed about a pound each. And he said, no, this is what you have to learn on.
Interesting.
And his idea was it would help build up your wrists and your fingers.
Sure.
Because he was of the old school, and like Buddy played the same way, Buddy Rich, developing your hands. He said you got all kinds of weapons here. You got 2 wrists and you got 10 fingers. Man, that's a lot of muscles. And that's kind of how I started. And then, getting ready to turn 17, 18. That was the drinking age in New York at the time, so now I could go into regular clubs. And then we started going to clubs, and I had all kinds of bands going. We played everywhere, loading up our stuff, taking them on the subway, taking them on buses. Nobody had a car. We just living in the big city, you know.
right.
And then I moved to Queens for my last year of high school, and got into the music scene out there. And I just turned 18 as soon as I graduated high school, and all of a sudden I had friends who had cars. And they started going to what they called the Long Island music scene. So I would go out to the place called the Action House in Leone's, and that's where I first met and saw Billy Joel. He was with a group called the Hassles. So we'd see those guys out there. Then Leslie West had a group called the Vagrants before he went into Mountain. He was out there. Back in the Bronx, by the way, there was a young lady by the name of Laura Nero, great songwriter, who wrote a lot of hits for a lot of people. She lived a few blocks away from me, and we used to see all these people because we were all trying to do the same thing. And none of us knew what we were doing. We had no idea.
No, everyone has to start somewhere.
Yeah, that's right. We had no idea. I bought my first drum set at Manny's, and I brought it home on the subway. I didn't even know how to set it up. I wasn't sure what goes. And then I find out, well, you don't have cymbals. I had 4 drums. That was it. So then I had to figure out. I had to work again and save money up and get a stand for the snare drum. And it's so funny when you look back at how innocent and clueless I was at the time. But you learn, and I got to meet a lot of people, and especially a lot of drummers, that were coming up the same way, and for the most part, I think drummers especially are very, very open and willing to share things. Very helpful.
Yeah, supportive.
And you pick stuff up here and there and everything else, and you learn and you learn and you learn, and I think that the amount of interest you have in doing that really has a lot to do with the results. I believe when you go into something, you should go into it with full passion, and dive right into it, and embrace the whole thing. And so I just learned and learned and learned and got to play with a lot of great people out in Long Island, and then went into Manhattan doing jazz gigs and blues gigs. And then one day I got a letter from Uncle Sam and I got drafted. I went to the Army, went overseas for a year, and came back, and I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't get my feet back, and I didn't touch the drums. And but one day a friend of mine calls me, who was actually I grew up with in the Bronx. He had gone to Queens College, got a degree in music, and here he was out on the West Coast. He became a music producer, and he was working with all kinds of people, Barbra Streisand, and people like that. And he invited me, you got to come out to California. I had no money. I couldn't go anywhere. Mm-hmm. So his name is Joe Ferry. He went on to become the head of the music production department at State University of Purchase, New York. He ran with everybody. He knew everybody, played with a lot of fantastic musicians. So I used to go down to Columbia and Atlantic Studios at night, and he'd get me in there. And a very young Dave Weckl was in there playing. Mm-hmm. Dr. John. Just all these people were in there recording, and he was working, doing production. And it was, just sit in the corner, be quiet. Don't be obvious, and just and I'm just eating it up. And what's he doing? What's that? And went through the books. Stick control and all that stuff. I still use it, and I guess when I was about 20 or 21. All the music teachers used to advertise in the back of the Village Voice, which was the edgy kind of a newspaper at the time in New York City. It had everything in it. But in the back, all the cats were back there, and Joe Morello had a standing ad back there. So I called up Joe, went out to New Jersey. I went back and forth with him, maybe less than a month, maybe two a month, for maybe about 2 years.
Wow.
And Joe talked, not necessarily played, which I thought was so important. And the things I walked away with, he was all about the Moeller method. He was all about getting your hands, working, understanding odd time signatures, all that stuff. But he also talked about carrying yourself as a musician. How do you behave as a musician? How do you function? You're a drummer, and Joe was an integral part to Dave Brubeck's quartet. He wasn't a guy sitting in the back. He was a participant. In fact, Dave Brubeck wrote so much music because of Joe's ability to play odd time. You look at all these stuff, in 9 and 11, and, it was just invaluable just sitting there talking. And then, there was a diner near his house. He said, hey, come on, let's go. He said, I paid him for a lesson. He said, come on, I'll buy you a coffee or something or what. And we would go and we'd hang out, and I wouldn't let him pay for anything. And a lot of guys had the same experience that went there. And it was just, then I started getting into my real life because I was at a decision point. Mm-hmm. You want to make the jump? You're right on the edge here.
What age were you at this time?
I was 22.
22. Okay.
I was right at the edge. And I grew up in a family. We came, I was born in Ireland. We came here with our suitcases. And my parents were all about working and staying to it. And that was always ingrained in my head. And I weighed, which way could I go? I had connections. I had this guy, Joe Ferry, who knows so many people. And, I could have gone into deeper study. I was thinking about, at the time, Berkeley wasn't exactly Berkeley yet. It had another name. That was one of the things to do. Purchase was still going on. And I just thought about it, and I just said, you know what? I have a lot of friends that are playing with some heavy guys, but they don't have any money. They don't. I just couldn't do it. After a while, I just waited, and I just dropped out, and I just played in bands, here and there, wedding bands, and I did that throughout the rest of my career. Is doing that, and when I moved to Lancaster from New York, it's gonna be 25 years this year. I got into the music scene, hung out. I met Clyde Lucas. Wonderful, wonderful man. We shared a lot of stories. And then, of course, took some lessons with him. And he was the same way. He would write out a chart and say, okay, Hickey, you got to start that, man. If you were ever over at his house, his basement was a little studio. And then he'd leave. He'd go upstairs.
I've heard this.
I stopped playing. I said,
so many times. It's
Hickey,
great.
what'd you stop for? I said, what's with this guy? He has me doing this thing. Doesn't he want to see if I'm doing it well? What am I doing here? And so I got to understand how he worked. But we had some great times. Him and Carol, his wife, used to come over to my house every Thanksgiving. She would bring us scalloped potatoes. And we just have a great time. We put all the records on, and I still miss that guy. He was just a great, down to earth, well-grounded guy. But that's basically my story. Is somewhat unconventional in terms of people in my era. How they came to get into the music world. Because when you look at all of those sales that happened in 1964, 65, 66, 67. Yeah. I mean, companies. I just looked at a podcast this morning about the Zildjian Drum Company, and they talk about what happened in the '60s with the sales just skyrocketing. But there's one thing we forget, that and this is where the studio musicians came in because they all came from the jazz world.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of them.
Yeah.
And everybody bought all these instruments, but nobody knew how to play. Right? I mean,
Yeah.
That's right.
I
Yeah.
want to be that guy. Look at Paul's bass. Yeah, Look at the little bit drums.
Yeah.
But they didn't know what to do with them when they got them. They figured it out.
No. Yeah.
But it all worked out in the end. But the point is that if you look at all those records that were made by all these bands that came up in the '60s and '70s, that's where places like the Wrecking Crew came in. They would go in. Oh, like the Byrds was a great example. They had a drummer, but he was okay, and they wanted to make an album. And the producers walk in and say, "Yeah, he's sidelined. We're bringing in our own people because." I mean, at that time, recording time was very, very
It's
expensive.
a common practice.
Absolutely.
You had to get in and get out. This guy's going to come in, he's going to nail it in 2 takes, 1 take. That's it. We don't do 15 takes. It's just too expensive.
Yeah.
And it happened with a lot of people. You look at you read the back of these liner notes on albums, and all of a sudden you see all these studio guys are in there doing it. Leland Sklar,
Oh, yeah. Huge.
Russ Kunkel, all those guys.
Yep.
They're all because this is a business. And it wasn't because they were fantastic. I mean, most of these songs didn't need fantastic, but these guys were great players. And the musicians that were in the band, maybe they just didn't have the chops for that particular, recording session or whatever it was. But
Yeah.
but a lot of that stuff now has sorted itself out. I think today that the whole music world, especially drumming, has come so far in terms of education. It's just great. And
You made a good point where earlier you were saying, these guys they didn't know what to do with it. Now we're just overloaded with a lot of information.
true.
You're like, oh, how do I play this song? You could just pull it right on your phone, computer, and just say, oh, this is how they did it. Back then, you're like, how do they do this? And there was so much mystery behind it that you just had to jump in, as we were saying earlier. You got to jump in there and just figure it out. Do your own interpretation of
Yeah.
it too.
Yeah.
Because the information wasn't as widely available and as easily accessible as it is now.
Yeah, a lot of people that developed their own style that became, legendary in their own right for their style of playing. They're like, I was just trying to do what he did.
That's right.
And this is as close as I came, so I developed this style. That's how a lot of it happened. I wanted to note a while back when we were talking about the days of the whole like music alley basically in New York.
Right.
You've had a lot of history with drums, with the drum set and everything, but also specifically with drum shops and drum stores. Could you talk quickly about maybe some things that have changed, some priorities that may have shifted? Give us a little insight into what things were like back then when you walked into a drum shop, maybe 20 years ago, what it was like versus today. And what do you think about,
Right.
What do you look for? What is important to you? What rubbed you the wrong way? Anything like that.
Exactly. Well, here, look, back in the day, you could go into a Manny's, and from what I heard, out in Chicago was, his last name is Ippolito. What's his first name? Frank Ippolito's drum shop. Places like that, there were icons, and you could go in there and not buy anything. It was a place to go and to see people
Yep.
and to talk drums, to talk about things. Yeah, you walked around, see what's new, what's going on, to get leads on jobs, all those kind of things. And then you fast forward to, the big box stores came in, the big box music sellers, and even some of the drum shops, where it was very sterile. It was a place of business. Drum sets were really not available to play. I mean, I can't speak for guitars and basses, but they were there. They were on display. You either buy them or you don't. Whereas if you went into Manny's, they would take down a drum. They would take out a drum set, and you could have at it. A guitar, if you were trying out a guitar or an amp, it was very supervised in Manny's. You just didn't walk around grabbing stuff, but you had salespeople that they worked with you. They talked to you. They trying to figure out what it is you need, what would be the best thing for you, and so there was a lot of that. But the camaraderie was incredible. And then, of course, as I visited drum shops in Manhattan in later years, they started closing rapidly. Of course, that whole block everyone is gone. They're all gone. And that's a shame. But I'll tell you when it changed for me. It changed for me. I love you, Rick, out there, but this new store is different. It's a little different in that these two guys are old souls. Because I started coming in here, and I could come in here and I could hang, and that's a big deal for me anyway, is to come in, maybe I'll buy something, maybe not, but I'll walk in to see what's new, talk to these guys, just talk drums, hey, you know about this, you know about that, and find out what's going on in the local music community, and just share stories, and that's precious. I mean, it's almost like when I was studying with Joe, how to conduct yourself, how to hang around with other musicians. What do you do, And that's another piece is it might be on the thumbs up or thumbs down thing, maybe a month from now, but drummers almost all the time when they go to a gig and they're the first one there, they always take their drum set and stick it in the corner. And I always wondered why. Why do you do that? Well, I know why, because we always look at ourselves as maybe less than some of the other musicians in the band. Sometimes they even say we're not musicians. We know that's ridiculous, but we resort to a corner where we can hide out or stay in the back, stay out of everybody's way. My world is I want to see everybody. I want them to see me because I'm going to interact with you. I'm going to have fun while I'm playing, not just the guys in the front who are talking to the crowd. Mm-hmm. And so that's fantastic. You've seen Steve Smith play. He's always at a perpendicular angle to the band. He wants to see everybody. Yeah. He wants to have eye contact. He could give a sign, a signal. Hey, we're going to this. Dim, dim, off we go. Or we're gonna go back to the head. We're not. We're doing this. We're doing that. Everything is going on, and it's an interaction, which is that's all part of how do drummers handle themselves and carry themselves. And if John's going to give you some advice after playing the drums now for almost 60 years, or over 60 years, I would say this is, hold your head up high. You're the most important member of the band as far as I'm concerned.
Agreed.
And carry yourself that way, Really, because you got something to say, and the rest of the band needs to hear it. And the audience deserves to see you and see you as a participant, not just laying down a beat somewhere. That's really tied into how drummers handle themselves.
Absolutely.
So...
Yeah. And sometimes I think that we do kind of lose sight of that. I think that we do, and I have to remind myself of that too. It's like, you're playing for the band, but also you're trying to entertain as well, and just
right.
Let your passion kind of flow through a little bit. So yeah, like keep your head up and know that you're there for a reason, and you're there to play drums, and everyone's there to hear you play and not anything else.
That's right. Yep.
All right. Awesome. Sounds great, man. Well, I think we should jump into the last fill, kind of how we close out the show. We ask you a couple questions, and obviously you just gave the most amazing advice ever. So I feel like we can check that one off the list unless you have something else to say. But we've got a couple things we like to talk about because we feel like this kind of thing is important to get off your chest. The first one is a train wreck or a nightmare drumming scenario that you can share with other drummers that get it. The second one is a proud achievement or rewarding moment that you can brag about without having to feel guilty about it because it's a lot of work we put into things. And the third one is advice if you have any other advice to give anyone. But feel free, man. If you have, do you have anything that stuck out to you as far as like that kind of like scary train wreck type moment or something you've experienced?
You kind of touched on something a little earlier where we were talking about vintage hardware. So was there a train wreck, something with that happened?
How did you know? It's exactly what it is.
Yes, that's it. I want to hear about this one, baby.
I was playing out in a nice club out on Long Island with a really good band, and I set my drums up. We didn't have drum rugs back then.
Get a drum rug.
Yeah. So I set my drums up on a linoleum floor. So we're getting into it, and I had a 24-inch bass drum,
of course,
and we were everybody was emulating themselves off of the Young Rascals, the Hassles, and the Vagrants. That because the Young Rascals introduced a thing called a Hammond B3 into the rock world, And if you had a Hammond B3, if you could play 5 notes, you were in the band.
Yep.
Okay? All you had to have that beast up on stage with a Leslie, and you were in. So we had one of those bands, and lo and behold, we were playing a rousing version of Aretha Franklin's "Respect," but the tempo was probably, maybe about a 160, and we were going at it, and this bass drum was moving, and it was moving, and it was moving. It took out my crash cymbal on the left side, went over in the middle of the song. Then the bass drum started pushing out. The bass drum pedal started moving off of the rim of the drum. It went on, and I actually wound up finishing the song. We finished the song early. Luckily, my bandmates got me out of it, and I was playing standing up. And
And now we know why
And-
John cranked down Vintage Hardware earlier. It's still living with him.
yeah, and all my bandmates said, you got to get some rope or something. You tie it around the front here and put it around your chair, your stool. Do something. Yeah, it'll never happen again, guys.
I love how that's the solution.
Yeah,
It's
not a
fun.
rug,
Yeah,
not
no.
a proper rug.
Tie yourself to it.
Yeah.
That's
That
right.
way
That's-
you go wherever the bass drum goes.
That's
Hey,
right.
It's logic.
That's what Buddy Rich did, right? If you look at all his old videos, it's him. He has ropes and tied to
There he
his
is.
not a proper drum rug.
No.
It's ropes.
He bungeed himself.
It's
to
funny
his
that
drums.
the things that we make up in our heads, especially non-drummers,
That's where all
telling
these
you
ideas
your
came from.
solutions.
There's a famous picture of Evelyn Jones on the Village Vanguard on stage, and he's got the hammer with the nails, and he's putting it right in front. He's got a little 18-inch Gretsch bass drum. I can't tell if he's putting it right through the hoop or if he's putting it in front of it, but he's got these big nails, and he's putting them on there because he beat the heck out of his bass drums.
Yeah.
So, the
you
stuff,
go.
it wasn't available.
Yeah, and stages and linoleum floors got scratched up all across
Yeah.
the nation. All
True.
across the nation. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, let's look on the bright side of things. Do you have a achievement or a proud moment in drumming that sticks out to you?
So when I was working I worked in New York City for the past 12 years before I retired, and sought out all kinds of music there. But on West 50th Street, there was a place called Time Check, a restaurant that was owned by a guy who was a weather reporter in New York. He retired and opened the restaurant. He loved jazz, so I went in there, wanted to check it out, and I find out, oh man, they got you could sit in, So I went back the next time, and all of a sudden, there's this guy, Jeff Andrews, who played with the Brecker Brothers, and I forget the horn players. He was with the Brecker Brothers also, and his wife was a well-known jazz pianist, and so I got to play with these guys. And the guy said, "Hey, man, what are you doing next week?" Next week, I became part of the house band, man. I go from work, go over there, and we were playing great stuff.
Yeah.
Skunk funk and all that stuff. It was really a lot of fun. And so that was like, from not having, that decision I made early on in my life.
Yeah.
It's sort of like these guys were my age too. I said, well, look, those guys are there now. But all of a sudden, I got on this highway the other way, but then I came back and I just met them over here.
You found, yeah.
It's the
Yep.
craziest
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, you
I
reconnected.
said, yeah, and it was fantastic.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Jeff Andrews, a wonderful guy, died about 4 years ago. 59 years old, he had a heart attack. He played with everybody, but he was just a sweet, humble. And, most musicians are like that. There's not a lot of ego going on. No. It's very welcoming. Just get in and play, man. Let's have some fun. We're not in a recording studio. We're not making. We're not in a stadium.
And that always feels like it's a common thread with a lot of our guests too. Was just that ambassador role, just the humble approach, just be nice. Everyone has said it, even Ed last week, and I remember Carl saying it too because he was on the road doing things. It's just like, going in and out of these different places, and you're meeting all these different people. Just keep a humble, sense about yourself, and that seems like it's a common thread.
Yeah, and there's ego. There's ego is useful in the music industry. There's places where people lean into it a little more or don't. It's never my thing, but also an easy way for you to tell if someone doesn't definitely doesn't have it if that overtakes their priorities in the music and execution of the gigs or professionalism. That's a very interesting balance and ratio to keep an eye on. You know, if they've got a good approach, they're welcoming. You know what I mean? They've got that, and they can also play. Hang on to them. That combo is what gets you places, get you moving forward. But you've dropped a ridiculous amount of incredibly useful advice and knowledge and wisdom on the podcast. Do you have anything else you want to leave folks with before we wrap up here?
Just one small little tag phrase. It has to do with music. Drummers, no matter what instrument you play, that this whole thing we're doing, you know, it's a journey. You never arrive. And you have to understand that because the famous, I forget his name now, he was a cello player. Somebody asked him one day, world renowned. They found out that he was almost 90 and he was still practicing. Or something. You still practice every day?
Yeah.
He said, yeah. He said, why? He said, because I think I'm making progress. Well, you know, a few years ago, Steve Smith was at Lebanon High School. I don't know if you guys remember. Dave Weckl was there.
Yeah.
Who else was there? It was a third person. I just remember because Dave Weckl carried his own sound guys with him.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
all into sound. But Steve Smith is on the side, and he's working on the pad. I said, I better get going, man.
Oh yeah.
I better get going. And of course, we all know that you can't stop playing because your muscles are going to complain very quickly.
Yep.
You know, and you got to stay in shape. And sometimes you don't feel like doing it, but that's what it's all about. It's staying humble and knowing that this is just a journey. There's no destination because it's always evolving, and there's no limit to what you can accomplish. There's no limit to creativity. There's always something to learn. Yeah.
Yeah, man. All right. Well, thank you, John, for being here, man. Thanks for joining us here today.
And thank you guys for the time, and thank you for being such an open, receptive, friendly drum shop. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for joining us here at Drum Key. If you want to contribute to the show, you can reach out to us anywhere you see Drum Key or Drums Etc. on social media, in person here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, or on the streets if you happen to run into Sean. If you see Sean on the streets, tell him your ideas for Crank It Up, Turn It Down.
I'll remember him. Don't worry.
He'll remember them. He'll text me in the middle of the night, and we'll put you guys on the show. But support your local drum shop. Supporting local drum shops is what keeps cool, fun things like this happening. If you don't have a local drum shop, we'd be happy to adopt you into our drumming family. Thank you guys, and we'll see you next time.